All right, I think we're live, team, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to what today, in my opinion, is going to be a very exciting Ask the Expert panel. My name is Barry Becker. I'm the General Manager for Infrastructure Services for IBM Global Technology Services. If you've joined us today and you're listening to this, you know that the past year has been defined by a lot of factors that have impacted how we work in the market. Rapid digitization, overall digital transformation, etc. And companies of all sizes need to review and sometimes transform multiple aspects of their business with those capabilities. At IBM Services, we've seen this firsthand through our work with clients. We've been a partner with Microsoft for over 30 years and are certified as a Microsoft Gold partner in many, many competencies. We've built and continue to grow a strong ecosystem of skills and offerings that we leverage to help clients run some of the largest and most complex enterprise IT environments in the world. Look, we all know that the cloud journey isn't easy. It can be challenging. It takes deep expertise to take the complexity out and deliver business outcomes, leveraging those forward-looking capabilities. And importantly, every company is on their own unique cloud journey. That's why today I'm very excited to be joined by two of our clients and speakers and have them share their story. As you'll hear, we have two very different companies joining us today who are on very different cloud journeys. They represent a range of ways that cloud, and in this case, Azure in particular, is helping companies gain agility, cost savings, and security. So with that, let's jump in and meet our panel for the day. Joining us from Dow is Tony Rubenacker, who's the Associate Director of Cloud, Platform, and Data Centers. Not really that busy of a job at all, right, Tony? Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Barry.
Second, we have joining us from Car Capital, an auto financing startup, is Christopher Mahana, who's the Chief Technology Officer. Thanks, Christopher, for also joining us as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Barry.
So, Tony, I'd like to really start with you. Look, Dow is a venerable, iconic company. We all know the brand well. And what I'd really like to start with is, what led to your decision to migrate workloads to the cloud? And as a couple of follow-ups, what did your IT environment really look like before? And what dynamics within the industry did you have to consider?
Thanks, Barry. So a couple things. First of all, our strategy over the last 3 years has been to leverage the cloud as part of Dow's overall strategy. We've become a cloud-first shop. And what that really means is we're looking to the cloud to drive increased agility, speed to market for our internal partners. How do we deliver traditional IT, compute and storage services faster to meet the digitization needs of our internal clients, to really help them deliver new applications, processes, etc., to market faster. Our IT systems are very traditional, what you'd expect at a very large company like Dow, very centralized, mainframe-centric. We have 7 main data centers around the globe, approximately 4,800 physical devices, almost 7,000 virtual machines that we back up in a traditional centralized infrastructure. So what we have to do is leverage the cloud to help us eliminate technical debt and get those virtual machine workloads off of our on-prem systems into the cloud is one of the things we're tackling right now.
Fantastic. So Tony, you mentioned a little bit about the size of the Azure environment that we're talking about. One of the things is, given this size and the fact that you have multiple data centers, you have a very complex IT ecosystem that has existed for a very long time. What considerations did you have to think about relative to a very homogeneous management and overall operating model?
Yeah, the key things that we had to take in consideration before migrating on-prem workloads to the cloud and even putting new platform as a service in the cloud, first and foremost was security. How do we maintain the integrity and security of our data? Being a chemical company, ensuring our data is secure as it is in a centralized model was paramount. We also had to ensure that our performance for our customers internally was maintained. We obviously can't allow latency. Many of our applications are distributed around the globe, so latency and eliminating latency was a key concern. And cost. We had to move to the cloud in such a way to minimize and actually lower costs. Our strategy and driving strategy to the cloud is not necessarily a cloud-first strategy, but we found that we can optimize those cloud workloads through several internal governance processes that we've been able to put in place and implement to ensure that when we move those workloads to the cloud, we optimize the workloads, we optimize the size, we monitor, et cetera, to lower our overall unit costs as we transition from on-prem to cloud.
Okay. Thanks for that, Tony. Christopher, I'd like to shift kind of the next question to you. Obviously, Car Capital is at a very different point in its overall history and evolution as a startup. So can you tell us just a little bit about who Car Capital is, and where exactly are you in your development and really looking at how you embrace IT, how you embrace this journey to cloud, or even on a born on the cloud mentality? I'd love to hear a little bit, and I know the audience would, from you as well, Christopher.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that, Barry. So Car Capital, so we're a technology company first. We provide a product to buy here, pay here independent dealerships to allow them to optimize their staffing and to provide a product that is not really out there in the market for them. As far as kind of looking at our direction and where we're at, we're actually startup, as you mentioned, so we're fairly new to the market. I think we just passed our first year as far as since we all kind of got together and had the first handshake to get everything moving. In the development platform, we're a cloud first environment. So having done many different environments where it was the traditional client server, data centers, things of that type. With this particular opportunity, I really wanted to reach out and leverage where cloud technology is today. I wanted to be able to take into account all of the efficiencies, the security, how everything works, and then also to be able to not have to worry about, is my server going to be big enough if I have a spike in traffic? So, leveraging pure Azure services from a security perspective was ideal. But then also the scalability part of it to make sure that everything that I do is very performant. I don't have to worry about, and Tony could speak to this in his current workload stuff, is I don't have to worry about how big my VM server is and how many VMs are sitting on it. I can just go out there and say, okay, well, I'm not getting enough bandwidth for the database and I need to expand that. So it's a couple of clicks and instantly I've got more bandwidth. So the opportunity to really start our business in the cloud first was key for my design from that. And it goes a lot with the security and the performance side of things.
Okay, thank you. So let's pull on that thread a little bit further, Christopher. So obviously as a startup, you've got to think very much about how your infrastructure, your applications can adapt to this kind of scale out approach. Without breaking the bank. Obviously, when you're beginning to scale your enterprise, you're thinking very much of how to manage cost with performance, with scalability. How are you looking at approaching that in terms of this born on the cloud type of approach so that you can quickly adapt to the demands and the hyperscale growth in the market that I know Car Capital is looking for?
Sure. So that was definitely a key item. So we looked at security first, and we also looked at scalability and performance. So we wanted to make sure that coming from a background where I had traditional data centers and racks of servers and things of that type, I wanted to make sure that when we built this platform and we built this entity, this whole company, is that we took that into consideration. So I didn't want to have the complexity of having to forklift out a piece of hardware. Or let's say that it's running just fine, and 5 years from now, I do need to replace it because it's out of warranty. Well, there's a lot of effort involved in that. With a completely Azure-based, cloud-based platform, I don't have to have that kind of complexity. I'm using the Azure Services. Allows me to have that scale literally by clicking. What also is added to that is the ability for it to auto scale up and auto scale back down. So I can get that benefit of the performance when I need it, and then I can have it come back down. So it helps me moderate my costs. So in a traditional environment where you have to buy a big piece of hardware to manage your peak, I'm not having to buy that big piece of hardware. I can say, okay, well, for 2.5 hours CPU time, I'm going to be increased my performance by boosting the number of instances that are available in the Azure app services for that particular service. And then I can reduce that back down. And it helps me keep costs more consistent with what I would expect from that side, as opposed to buying a great big piece of hardware and hoping that I use everything on it, or finding something to put on it because I'm not leveraging all the CPU cycles.
Oh, that's definitely a unique perspective in terms of how to approach that. And Tony, it's funny. We all obviously have spoke prior to this panel discussion, and it's interesting as we sit and listen to Christopher and we compare the dynamic of a startup like Car Capital with your company Dow, and this concept of truly born on the cloud, talking about building their IT and their applications without really having to consider, the technical debt of physical assets or data centers.
Right.
So one of the things I'd like, Tony, maybe to direct to you is, as you migrate to a new environment, how are you incorporating security? Let's start with that, and then I've got a little bit of a second part, a follow-on question that's around, how does automation that you're taking advantage of help you with security and overall management? And I know we at IBM have even done some work with you in this space as well. So would appreciate you sharing your points of view there as well.
Yeah, thanks. So as we've migrated our systems, we obviously have to maintain continuity from a service perspective. So as you know, Barry, we have a strong partnership with IBM right now, and they support all of our on-prem systems. So part of the migration approach we take is a lift and shift first where possible for virtual machines. We're targeting approximately 2,500 virtual machines to move under our current effort. Our objective has been to maintain that continuity and move those systems as seamlessly as possible. So what we've done is we've been able to essentially build out the new cloud environment, the infrastructure as a service environment in Azure, and we've been able to fail over those systems using the Microsoft Migration Factory approach to the Azure environment. We maintain continuity because we're moving the image. We make sure that all the security protocols, all the DNS routing information, all the monitoring systems and applications, the API calls, etc., all those things remain intact. So when we turn on the switch, and that's in the Azure environment, everything works as it did on premise. And that's the model that we have to do these migrations en masse. A couple key things from a security and partnership perspective is, as I've mentioned, we have to make sure that our partners, our security teams, everyone is aware that we're going to move that system. We cut it over, and we expect that it's going to be a pretty seamless migration. So that's the virtual machine IaaS approach. And you also asked about security considerations that we've had to put into place. A lot of that is twofold at Dow. We are also modernizing applications beyond lift and shift. So we have platform as a service, and which we also leverage. We do want to be more born in the cloud, as Chris and Car Capital is doing. From a security perspective, that's one of the bigger challenges that we have to deal with is upskilling our development organization, upskilling our database administrative teams, et cetera, to understand that the onus is more on them from a cloud perspective when you get into the platform as a service space versus a straight lift and shift from an IaaS perspective. So those have been some of the biggest challenges and things we've had to consider with our migrations, is making sure that all the tool sets, the image and what have you remains intact so that we can truly do a lift and shift. it's taken us a few trial and error, some stops and starts over the last 18 months, but we've got a pretty aggressive migration strategy, and we can move 150, 200 at a time right now. So we're moving them pretty quickly.
Yeah, we in collaborating with your teams, Tony, I'll definitely say that there's been obviously lessons learned, and there's intellectual capital and processes that have continued to be refined and honed to ensure that level of success. So it's good to kind of hear you walk through that. Christopher, back over to you. Similar to the last question, obviously you're offering a financial product, and you obviously have a very significant security and data privacy considerations that you have to go through. So could you spend just a few minutes really describing how did you ensure that security and data privacy considerations were incorporated into your overall cloud native architecture?
Sure, absolutely. So working very closely with the IBM team during our design phase of the overall Azure architecture, we really looked at the ability to do very much like we would do in a traditional data center setting, where we can isolate the physical environment. So we can isolate, in this case, a database. Let's just use that as the example. We have the ability to say, okay, we're going to put different layers of security around that database that basically makes it just like it was in a locked cage in a data center. And then along with that, we've added the additional layer of database encryption at the actual storage level. So we've really taken into account a lot of those different features, and in kind of making sure that we have all of those different security mechanisms in place, and that they really provide the multi-layer approach that you would traditionally have for any good security walling or isolation process. So definitely from a from a system perspective, what we wanted to do was not look at how we built everything as if it was sitting on VMs. I mean, that would be the normal, that's what Tony's going through. He's got VMs, he's moving workloads out, that kind of thing. What I wanted to do when we built this company was look at it from a scale perspective. So I know that I could put so much on one particular VM, and I could buy more resources for that VM and continue to grow it. But I've got resources that are being allocated to a VM that are doing nothing but hosting a website, for example. So to get a better cost, get a greater footprint or smaller footprint, depending on the load need, we went with the service side of things. So we're using app services, we're using the database as a service, we're using everything, the as a service model. That way we can give ourselves, where appropriate, the additional bandwidth or the additional resources without having to go out and say, okay, well, I need to crank up another VM and load some more stuff up on it and use, a third of the resources to run the VM and the rest of it's for whatever's on that. I kind of get that benefit of not having to worry about that because it is all using the as a service type platform.
Chris, right? It's interesting because the framework that you're describing is really predicated on the model of cloud economics, right? That as you go scale out as needed model, whether it's from a microservices, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS perspective. So it's interesting to kind of hear you relate to that. So Christopher and Tony, here's what I'd like to do in the remaining 10 minutes we have left, roughly. I think we've got a few hundred people that have joined us in this session today, so thank you for everyone that's attending. And I'm seeing kind of a rapid stream of questions, so we're going to do a little bit of I'll call it the speed round for the three of us. We're going to try to hit several of these questions. Tony, I'll call out if it's for you, or Christopher if it's for you, and for the audience, we'll try to get to as many of these as possible, but let's see where we can get to. So Tony, I'll come back over to you. One of the questions our audience have thrown our way is, you mentioned obviously migrating, obviously, moving from physical environments into a virtual environment, into the cloud, into Azure. What migration tools did you use to accelerate your migration?
So yeah, Barry, this is our second migration wave, and we've taken a partnership approach. Our first wave, we leveraged Accenture. They had a migration factory, essentially proprietary tool set on the back end. They've done this with other large companies like Dow. That served us well to do straight VM lift and shift. And essentially behind the scenes, what it is a failover of your environment. You're essentially restoring a VM to the cloud server that you do a duplicate copy of in Azure. On our current migration effort, we're leveraging Microsoft's Migration Factory. And that is a big partnership that we've engaged with Microsoft to help us eliminate a lot of our technical debt. The targeted VMs right now, get those off of aged hardware. But it's essentially very similar to what we did in our first round of migration. So we're leveraging Microsoft's toolings behind the scene. You know, it's been successful to date. You do have to very proactively manage it. You have to make sure that your security teams, your application owners, your DBAs, et cetera, all the key players that you would think of are with you on the journey for it to be successful. And especially the partnership, you know, as I mentioned, your support partners, we've had IBM right at the table because when we move these things, it has to be seamless. So when we activate it in Azure, we expect monitoring, Big Fix, all those tools that we count on to keep our systems patched and ready are running real time right when we migrate.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it. So, Christopher, next one from you, another attendee that has joined us today asks, Christopher, did you use serverless as your main strategy? What were your use cases for traditional VMs for you as a cloud-first company?
So yeah, so that's one of the things we looked at is we did not take a traditional VM approach. As a matter of fact, I only have one VM. Everything else I'm leveraging is the as a service type of objects. From the security perspective, you know, app services, SQL Server as a service. I really wanted to look at it from a scale and a performance perspective because the Azure framework has all of the ability to secure everything. And with all of the different layers of network security groups and routing and different things you can put in, you know, front door and Azure gateways for app services and things like that. So all the security pieces work really well together in that regard. And let's talk about that for a second. That gives me the ability to layer in a security item without having to go find a vendor to install something on a VM, or go grab whatever software that I need to put in front of a VM to try to help secure it. I also don't have that layer of security, or that whole threat vector is eliminated from my view. Obviously, Microsoft has that from their side, but it's obfuscated in such a way that it doesn't really present itself as a security risk. But it allows us to look at each one of those services. I'm doing complete Azure AD. I don't have an Active Directory sitting anywhere on a physical piece of hardware. All of my machines connect over the internet, and they're able to authenticate. My users are able to move back and forth with Office 365. We have really taken the opportunity to embrace the complete complexity of what the Microsoft offering is, from both the user all the way up to the DevOps side of things, and trying to leverage as few of the traditional means of doing things, just so that we can make sure that we really do embrace as much as possible the 100% cloud type of design.
Okay. Thank you, Christopher. Tony, let's direct another one towards you. So this one's a little bit more specific, but an interesting question. How did you handle databases, especially large ones? Ones that are, let's say, over 100 gigabytes in size. Was there any optimization that was needed as you went through this transformation, Tony?
Yeah, what we found, Barry, for the larger systems, especially the larger databases that get up in the 100 gig plus, two things. We had to obviously make sure that we allowed enough time and test it out on our dev environment, test the migration to see how long it's going to take, so that we could get a window to migrate that from a downtime perspective, managing our user expectations. Because one thing that's often underestimated in these cloud migrations is the impact of negative migrations, or what I would call failures. Your user community, at least at Dow, is not very forgiving if you have a system that doesn't migrate in the window. So we test, make sure that we can migrate those systems. Then we've leveraged our Azure subscription, and often on those larger systems, it's getting the right tier. So are we running Ultra, are we running Premium, et cetera, to get the right speed of disk, the right SASD, the right CPU mix, and then we migrate those systems, and we also ensure that we have the right circuits. So we've put a lot of pre-planning, a lot of time went into making sure that our network, our pipes basically, We're latency resistant for some of these large migrations, so we have dedicated circuits for some of those larger systems that we migrated, is what it boils down to. You're not necessarily going to put those on a smaller circuit and expect to migrate a database of any size in a reasonable window. So it's a combination of the right network, the right circuit sizes, and making sure that your Azure IaaS VM is built appropriately is what it comes down to. We've got to the point now where we can size those pretty much on the fly, but again, it's been a lot of testing, a lot of trial and error earlier, but we've got that down to where we can comfortably migrate those without issue.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. I'm going to go to our final question, and then we're running out of time, team, but there's a plethora of great questions online here, but let me kind of throw a final one to both of you. And Christopher, I'll ask you to answer first rather quickly, and I want to give Tony a moment, and then I'm going to wrap us up. But one of the final questions here, and I know we hear this a lot from an IBM Services perspective, was how did you handle any skills or knowledge gaps on your internal teams post-migration? In other words, so you've adopted this new technology, you're changing your IT strategy, you're adopting still traditional private, public. How did you handle that? Because that was obviously a big change for your teams. Christopher, I'll go to you first.
So from my perspective, the nice thing is that we started cloud first. So bringing on developers and folks who understood Azure, who knew that platform, working with the IBM team to get it architected in such a way that it made that transition a little bit more seamless, a little easier. So from my side of it, it was fairly easy. I'm starting from scratch. For me, just learning the shift from traditional client-server data centers to the Azure framework and how things work in Azure was pretty much the biggest change.
Fantastic. Tony?
Yeah, from a DAO perspective, it's been an interesting journey. We have, as you know, we have the traditional, we're maintaining a traditional on-prem infrastructure while simultaneously, getting a large footprint in Azure. We essentially have a lot of people wearing two hats right now, is what it comes down to. One, from a support perspective, one reason that we went with IBM, to be transparent, is because IBM was able to come in and upskill and staff with people who could support our cloud services, our cloud infrastructure as a service virtual machines once moved. That really helped because we were at the same time upskilling our DAO badged employees. So that was really key, the ability to have a partner who could bring that Azure cloud knowledge from a support perspective and the infrastructure as a service perspective. The other thing was just, a lot of time to upskill. Like I say, we have a lot of people wearing dual hats right now. You have traditional infrastructure people who have 25 years experience supporting mainframe environments who can also easily go into the Azure environment. So we took advantage of all the Azure training, working with our partners, job shadowing, etc. But upskilling was a key thing that we did when we built our foundation out. We made sure our people were trained before we started down this path.
Fantastic. Well, look, Tony, Christopher, we're out of time, but what a great conversations, and the questions keep rolling in. So I know there's a lot of your peers in industry that would love to further pick your brains. So team, and to the audience on the phone, look, today you've heard two examples where IBM Services and two of our great partners and clients and companies have advanced their business with Azure. Azure is increasingly part of a hybrid ecosystem that we encounter every single day. And we're intensely focused on helping companies through this digital transformation by really driving the complexity out of the systems of existing IT estates and making sure we're assisting in the adoption of those hybrid ecosystems that you heard Tony and Christopher speak about today. So I want to close with a personal invitation to all of you. If you've heard anything that resonates with you, I'd ask you to please reach out to me and chat over LinkedIn, and let's have a conversation to explore what we can do to help you advance your cloud journey. And if we can share further ideas from our clients who are having similar challenges or similar journeys, we'd love to start that conversation. So with that being said, Tony and Christopher, thanks again. And with that, we'll go ahead and conclude this session for today. Thanks for attending, everyone. Bye-bye.